Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
This is
Hello.
Exceptional Radio. And it's, what is the date? It's the 22nd of December.
No, it's the 27th of December. I forgot to turn off the rerun. So it's the 27th of December, and it's finally feeling like winter in Indiana. We had a cold spell. It got down into like the teens, and that was kind of cool. Not really. It was bitter, piercing cold. But today it's like I don't even know what the temperature is right now. It's 53 degrees. What the? So it's 53 degrees. It's December 27th. We're a few days away from my birthday. This is the last episode of 2020. I feel like that deserves a little bit of... So it's we're getting close to the end of a few things, and the beginning of a few more things. Today I found this image. It says boycott to fight back. And it says something like, the GOP boycott of Kemp's rigged runoff will break the algorithm, saving not only the Senate, but President Trump's second term. The results of a boycotted election, the algorithm, this word is used quite a few times, the algorithm was never designed for unheard of levels of GOP non-participation. The algorithm will steal votes from the GOP, but there will be so few in heavily Democratic precincts that GOP vote totals will go negative. Equally outlandish results will appear in other districts. The fraud will be so obvious, SCOTUS can then invalidate the presidential election. Real conservative senators can be appointed after Kemp, Perdue, and Loeffler's arrest. Rhino and Democrats have traded power for years. The Georgia fraud is the last straw. Let's break the duopoly on power. Listen to Lynn and Sidney, blah, 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 blah. So they use this word algorithm a lot, and I just get the feeling they don't know what an algorithm is. And I know that Chris has developed numerous algorithms, like really meaningful algorithms that can extract data from interaction and then weigh that against other users' interaction and then assign values for this. And so I know that at least one of us has some really extensive experience in this area in generating an algorithm. And I'm pretty sure that algorithms can be used to tabulate votes, but I'm pretty sure that an election based off of the actual number of votes, it doesn't rely on an algorithm as much as it relies on actual tallying of votes. So maybe if you could explain how algorithms work.
Yeah, I mean, technically, so any algorithm at its core is just like a set of commands in a system that's going to have variables and execute functions that are, it's like, it's a way to get dynamic information in a standardized format so meaningful analysis can happen at the base. That's all an algorithm does, in the sense of like even more simple algorithms don't even necessarily need something to be analyzed. Like an algorithm can just run a function. So it's like at the core, algorithms are how computer operations and executions happen. Like every time something's happening on a computer, an algorithm is running. And the actual word is like, what's his name? Charisma? What's his name? Hozam. I can't remember how to pronounce it. But basically, algorithm is like a bastardized Western pronunciation of his name. Al-Khawarizmi. I think that's as close as I can get in my Western tongue. But effectively, this dude is like a badass mathematician that came up with all these like ways to approach information, and ultimately computer algorithms are based on his like algebraic deconstruction of information at the core. So this is why algorithms like have been around. Like, okay, here's the thing. Computers, the way we know them, are relatively new in the sense of like Ada Lovelace and Babbage's machine is like the way we construct our notion of modern computing, whereas like computers have been around for actually like thousands of years effectively. So like the Antikythera machine is technically a computer, even though it doesn't have like a display or whatever, the way we think of it. And then an abacus is effectively like the base 10 representation of information in the way that like computers in binary represent information. Not all binary uses base 10. Yet I digress. What I'm getting at is algorithms are just a way to like break down processes and information. So when people are like talking about the algorithm is doing this and that, they're just using it's not even weasel words. They're trying to make themselves sound more authoritative and more informed. And it's a way to like these people are politicians who never programmed a fucking thing in their life. They've never written. They probably paid people to do their algebra homework and all that shit. So they probably don't actually even know like regular algebra. So this is kind of why, again, when you have the father of algebra, of modern algebra, having his name abstracted by people who can't pronounce it correctly into something that then they turn into a word that becomes a haughty way to show that you're speaking about something technological. This is where you really like, there's no way anybody in Congress would know about the Antikythera machine outside of fucking Ancient Aliens or like the implications of what that means in computing, or they wouldn't know Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace off the top of their fucking head. So this is where, again, when I'm talking about algorithms, I'm not talking about Facebook's algorithm. I'm talking about algorithms conceptually, because I know the history of them, and I know the guy who fucking the word is based off of. Nobody in Congress knows that fucking shit off the top of their head. And even if they were like given all this information in a packet, they wouldn't be able to learn it in like a day. So this is stuff, when you're talking about understanding how algorithms work, they have no fucking room speaking on algorithms. They shouldn't even be using the fucking word in Congress. Like, nobody in Congress is educated enough to use the fucking word algorithm, knowing what it actually means and the implications of an algorithm. And that's why it's so frustrating to people like me who end up compartmentalized on purpose, mainly because I'm black, because this government has like very few specialists at high levels that are not white. But when somebody like me is a cybersecurity specialist, they ain't fucking listening to me over here, and I'm not begging them for fucking recognition or validation. So we're at this standoff where like I'm not an enemy of the state, but I know I'm on some fucking list because they can't fucking help themselves. Meanwhile, you got this fucking terrorist running around Nashville bombing shit, but the FBI is monitoring people like me because I know more than them, and they see me as a threat because they can't fucking hire me without me shaving my head and acting like, oh, I need to code switch and talk like a fucking white man. I can't call them nigga. I can't be like, hey, nigga, you fucking up. I can't do that shit at the FBI. Oh, this is diversity breach. Fuck out of here with that shit. I ain't signing no fucking, I ain't writing no goddamn diversity statement to apply to no university. I ain't doing shit for a fucking colonialist system to get validated to all this bullshit that is meant to invalidate my perspective as a black man. So this is why when I'm saying these motherfuckers have no business talking about algorithms, there's going to be people like, who the fuck is this guy? I know more than all of those motherfuckers in Congress and 90% of the fucking people in the Pentagon at the highest fucking levels, because their fucking their heads are so far up their own asses that they can't fucking see past the 1960s. So I have no fucking problem talking as if I know more, because I know I fucking know more than all of those people combined. I know more than all of them fucking combined. But the problem is, people are so wrapped up in the media's portrayal of like what is authority on shit that people like, again, who the fuck is this guy? It's like, yeah, I'm the guy that fucking academics study and the fucking government talks abstract about. I'm the guy that's writing those fucking algorithms that they don't even know what the fuck they're talking about. And that's why I can talk about those dumbass fucks like this. I can call them dumbass fucks because that's what the fuck they are. And they have to acknowledge that when somebody like me says that, because I have the fucking credentials and I've put in the fucking work to say that shit. And that's why they have no fucking business using that fucking word. And that's why I say shit like this, because, yeah, guess what? They'll put on a suit. They won't say fuck. They won't say shit. Meanwhile, those fucks are using algorithms to bomb fucking kids and keep people poor. So, yeah, fuck those people. Fuck them in their stupid fucking ears. Fuck all of them, because they use all, like, it's the people who know shit like me, but are also too fucking, they're bitch to actually stand up and say, I'm not going to use my fucking energy, I'm not going to use my knowledge to fight for some imperialist fuck. Fuck these capitalist imperialist fucks. I fucking hate them. I fucking hate these people. And that's why I'm not fucking using my energy for them. There ain't no goddamn way, not at gunpoint. You could have a fucking nuke pointed at me. I am not working for these fucks for a goddamn second, because they're imperialist fucks.
I'm pretty sure that there is a nuke pointed at...
Exactly, and I'm not doing shit for them. And I'm still, you can have 20,000 nukes pointed at me. I am not doing fucking shit for you capitalist, imperialist fucks. And you can put that in your goddamn file. Put that shit in your file.
You know, it's interesting. We've been given this idea that, you know, the market will determine the value of labor. But the reality is that we've been given a glimpse of what the market actually does. And when we hit pandemic times, the labor market dissolves. And all of a sudden, it doesn't matter how skilled somebody is. If that job doesn't exist, they're not going to add value to something that doesn't gain value from them beyond their labor. And we're seeing that right now. We're watching supply chains still struggle to return to whatever normal was, whatever people thought normal was, at least. And we're seeing, you know, people losing their unemployment benefits, and we're starting to see long lines to food banks. Again, actually, but they're coming out in winter, so it makes it even kind of makes me feel a little worse about it. 'Cause like, man, that's just gotta suck if it's cold, but.
I refuse to become a millionaire in a country that has poor children. I just fucking refuse. I absolutely refuse to do it. It's gross. And the billionaires and millionaires that contribute to fucking poor kids running around because they're too stuck in their goddamn egos to realize that they're part of the problem, fuck those people too, man. I hope they all burn in hell. Like, honestly, I really hope they all burn in hell. I am so sick of pretending I don't wish those people burn in hell. I fucking really hope they burn in hell. Like, straight up. Like, I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm looking at America, and it's one of those things where it's so comical that these people pretend that they're Christian, where I'm like, I'm a Nazarite. Like, I don't really like Nazarites don't really broadcast that shit because we don't have books and we don't proselytize. And here's the thing about Nazarites. We're not Christian. We're effectively like rogue Jews. We're ninja Jews because our shit like predates Christianity. So when I see all these fake ass fucking Christians out here like being capitalist, as a Nazarite, I'm like, you guys need to fucking burn in hell for like a few millennia and then come back as like some shit that is in a capitalist engine to like really understand why this is like so far from the shit that Jesus was teaching, if that motherfucker ever actually existed. Like, if Jesus actually existed, what America is what killed him. That shit literally fucking crucified him. It's the same fucking engine. It's the same goddamn engine. And then those people turn around and blame Jewish people for killing him. That's how that shit works. That's how fucking propaganda works. The dude was Jewish, and then you have Christians blaming Jewish people for fucking killing him when it's the fucking Roman Empire. For fuck's sake, it's like these people are like worshiping an idol in the Antichrist and have no idea because they didn't actually read their own text. It's like that's why I'm like, I hope you all go to hell. I hope those people go to hell. Really do. Because then that's why I'm like, hell is meant for people like this who are so stuck in the hedonist abstract lies that are meant to distract from piety. If you're actually trying to be pious, you don't get wrapped up in false teachings by man. That's literally the first fucking commandment. It's the first fucking commandment. False idols, like, bro, that's where I'm like, these people don't even know their own. It's not their religion. They're all fake Christians. They're all fucking fake Christians because real Jesus didn't have a fucking church. He was like anti-church. Upon this rock, I build my church. And there was no fucking church. That's not a metaphor, man. It's like, it's these people have no idea what the Antichrist is because they've I think they actually don't actually care, and they're just using Christianity as an excuse to be white supremacist douchebags. But under the premise that they actually think they're Christian, they have no fucking idea. They can't have read that book. I've read the Bible multiple times. There is no way that people who become a millionaire will ever, like, there's a fucking scripture about it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. There's literally a scripture about that. You're not getting into fucking heaven if you're rich. Like, you can't. There's a fucking scripture about it.
So, in the last, how many months are we in? Are we into this? We're into this a year. Because a year ago, you and I were making fun of Batman getting bat flu. So, in the last year, Bezos and the rest of the billionaires in America have increased their I guess their holdings into to the tune of $637 billion. And in 2018, it was estimated that it would only cost $265 billion to, eradicate poverty, like, completely. World poverty, $265 billion a year. So they managed to generate enough revenue in a year to end poverty for the next 2.5 years, practically. Just America.
Or if you look at the math in a different perspective, the labor they stole from everyone to accumulate that wealth may happen to be the cause of poverty. But because we can't determine cause and effect in the real world, we just have to say it correlates. It correlates negatively in that it's directly, the more that they get wealthy, the less everyone else gets to share. So that negative correlation is directly corollary with their wealth. But nobody in the fucking media is brave enough to say that shit because their jobs and their being near the 1% depends on them not calling out Bezos for basically stealing everybody's fucking labor and keeping everybody poor.
He got $48 billion richer in the last year. 48 billion. Ugh, 48 and 9 zeros. That's like an insane number. I mean, the 48 makes it sound tiny and manageable, but 48 billion.
And you always see in the media they abbreviate it like 48B.
48BN.
Yeah, but if it's ever like a social program or something, they like put all the zeros and all the commas. It's like, oh, it'll cost $1 billion to feed hungry children, and then they like drag it out and put it in big ass letters and big ass font, like to make it seem like that amount is somehow bigger than what Jeff Bezos or whatever.
Yeah. When they want to discourage the program, they go for the big numbers. So I can't even find a date on this article. So, anyways, at one point it was estimated to be $1.74 trillion to end poverty in just America. And versus this other.
I don't even believe in hell, but I hope hell is real just for these people. I like sincerely, like I want hell to be real just so they can go burn there for eons.
I'm just glad these people aren't like astronomers, because if these are the kind of numbers that they're coming up with, they'd be so off in terms of astrophysics. Can't have that kind of like just deviation. A few billion to 1 point something trillion, 1.7 trillion, or the difference between a few billion and 1.74 trillion is actually a lot. That's a hell of a lot. You could have 100 billion and it would still be way less than 1.74 trillion.
But this is where Americans not being good at math and then perpetually using it as like a punchline. I'm not good at math. I'm not good at math. This is why their dumbasses never actually like figure out how much their government is fucking everybody. Like everybody gets fucked. Everybody's getting fucked. But they just do enough to make some people feel like they're getting fucked less than others to keep that hierarchy in check. That's how caste system works. Like, as long as somebody feels like they can punch down, and there's always untouchables that everybody can punch down at and look, at least I'm not an untouchable, then that's where everybody keeps that caste system going. And this is where Americans are all complicit in that shit. Because this is why that hidden slave labor on the rest of the world, and then it's like, it's not slave labor here, it's like the most exploited labor that people can get without actually being like straight slaves. I mean, but then you talk about the prison industrial, so yeah, those people are slaves. But again, this is where, but like a lot of Americans don't know that prisons like make shit. They make like
furniture,
refrigerators.
Furniture.
It's not just fucking license plates like they show you in the movies. And the movies there, all those movies perpetuate that myth that, they just make license plates in prison. So people don't study how much shit they actually make and build in prisons while they're paying these dudes like 15 cents on the hour, and then turn around selling a fucking refrigerator for like hundreds or thousands of dollars on the like cents for the labor that they got to build that shit. And it's where it's like, man, it's a whole prison, it's a whole slave system in this country that people are either actively ignoring or just like too wrapped up in their own bullshit to realize is there. Either reason is not good. But that's where I'm like tired of white liberals like
prisons produce books for the blind, lingerie, park benches and picnic tables, military jackets and battle garb, human silhouette targets, old IKEA products, baseball caps, canoes, artsy knickknacks, blue jeans, horses. What? There's a prison horse training program? The fuck? In Colorado, the Wild Horse Inmate Program, WHIP, trains wild Mustangs, preparing them for adoption. Since 1986, the program has trained over 5,000 Mustangs. In Maryland, Second Chances Farm takes in retired thoroughbred racehorses. It reaches out to out-of-work horses from the slaughterhouse and teaches outgoing inmates animal caretaking skills. That sounds like a really incredible rehabilitation program.
Yeah, except they're making money off of it.
Yeah, that's well.
Again, it's like it'd be great if the people who were doing it could then turn around and go work in that field, but they fucking can't because they're felons.
Yeah.
So again, it's like the same shit with the firefighters. Oh, it'd be great if the firefighters could go get jobs firefighting, getting paid a lot, but they can't because they're fucking felons. So all this shit sounds great on paper. Then these dudes go back in the real world and can't do anything because of their fucking record. And then the government doesn't give them any fucking help. So then they either go commit a crime again or fucking kill themselves. That's how that shit fucking goes. That's exactly how that's why there's a movie about it. Oh, this movie's so good. It's because it's based on fucking the cycle that everybody goes through in the real world, but you don't want to acknowledge it, so you take this movie and clap about the fucking movie because that's all you can actually, like, not you, but the people in America can only absorb these movie interpretations of American life, and then they like, oh, Precious is such an amazing movie. It's so sad. Well, yeah, that's because you know that shit's happening around you, but you don't want to fucking do anything about it, so you watch the movie to make yourself feel good about not being that person. And it's all a bunch of Schadenfreude. This whole country is a bunch of Schadenfreude pretending they fucking care. Oh, I want to donate. I'm giving back to my community. I'm donating. Guess what? You're not fucking fixing the problem. You're just doing that shit for yourself. It's like a compulsive cycle of doing just enough to make people feel good, to let the cycle keep going and make themselves feel like they're contributing, knowing like they're trying to become millionaires too. They just like, oh, I'm downtrodden until I fucking hit the lottery, and then once I become a millionaire, fuck all y'all too. I'm moving out the hood. I'm moving out the ghetto. Fucking, you know, it's the same shit. Everybody's pretending they're fucking trying to do some shit. Because the issue is you don't have to be rich to change this shit. That's where, but people don't want to like take that perspective, because then you realize, oh, guess what? It's not going to be easy to change shit and not build a little nest egg to make sure what if the pandemic hits, I need my nest egg. I need to make sure I can pay my bills. Well, that's a terrible reason not to be altruistic.
So I was wrong. Between March 18 and October 13 of this year, Bezos made $90 billion. $90 billion. He had a 79.8% increase in wealth in 7 months. What the fuck? We can raise. He can redirect $90 billion in that short of a time, but we can't. We somehow can't do healthcare right or pandemic response right. Amazon, the great savior during COVID pandemic times. Ugh. This shit's so depressing.
It's like only depressing because Americans don't do anything about it. Like they don't strike, they don't acknowledge it. They just fucking are passive sheep. I think that's what's the most depressing part. I honestly, I don't fucking care at this point how much money Elon or Jeff makes, because like Americans let that shit happen, and that's where I'm like, oh, these fucking dumbass Americans are just sitting here letting these rich people fuck them in the ass, just acting like that shit is like, that's just the way it is because they're rich. I guess I have to take this fucking ass fucking. And it's like one of these.
If they don't make all that money, how are they going to create new jobs and trickle down that wealth.
Yeah. Oh man. Again, that's where I'm like, I can't care about somebody more than they care about themselves. And knowing that America is like kind of on its like last leg and is a dying paradigm, it's like, yeah, I guess I'm behind the walls and I'm a second class citizen, but the rest of the world is moving on. Like, it's all right. It'll be fine without us. And I kind of like, it's one of those things where, again, it's only depressing if you want America to be at the head of the table and be in charge in the world police and that bullshit. Because it's like, America don't need to be there.
Man,
and I'm glad they're losing that shit. And in
nice
the process,
if they could still be taken seriously at the table.
Is it? Because this country has done 400 years of wrong. I don't think they should be at that table. I
I mean, you want to exclude them from the
Absolutely.
neo-colonial table where everyone tries to make
It's
them
not gonna. It's gonna be less neo-colonial if you take America away from the table. Is what I'm saying.
Okay.
You know. So that's where I'm. America can't not be neo-colonial. The rest of the table is like, hey, global climate change is happening. We're gonna all fucking die if we don't stop burning coal and oil. And America's like, I want my pickup truck. I just want a pickup truck.
Well, no. If the world decreases using oil and coal, then America can use more, right? That's
Yeah, that's how America sees it. That's exactly. Oh, we'll take a what part of the oil and coal market since the world wants to let that go. They'll go. Let them have their solar and wind. What happens if the wind stops blowing? What are you gonna do if the wind stops blowing? What about then? What are them fans and windmills gonna do? One day there's just gonna be no wind, 0 miles per hour, 0. Then we'll have our coal, we'll have our oil, we'll be ready. We'll be ready for that day when the wind stops blowing.
I wonder what that would actually require, because pretty much every physical model shows that as the temperature increases or decreases, atmospheric conditions become harsher and more chaotic.
For the record, that argument is like an actual argument put forth by a Republican. I didn't make that up. An actual Republican said, what if the wind stops blowing? That's where, again, these are the people that don't need to be at the fucking table. Seriously, those people, if the people in charge think that one day the wind might stop blowing, so that's why you can't use wind power, they do not deserve a seat at the table. They need to be at the kids' table.
No, there is one argument for not using the giant windmills, at least the ones that we have right now, is that those fan blades are like, huh?
They kill a ton of birds.
Well, no, it's more that the fan blades themselves can't be recycled. They're made.
I mean, but they kill a ton of birds. That's fucked up.
Yeah, that's also fucked up.
It's fucked up because of the vortexes they cause and the way that they're designed and the way they're laid out. A bunch of birds end up flying into them and dying. That needs to change. There's a bunch of different ways these fan blades can be designed, and using that same dumbass basic fucking design is why they kill a bunch of birds. Fuck them, like fuck the recycling. Like they should be used for like perpetuity. Like they don't need to be recycled. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about them killing millions of fucking birds every year. Like they should be there like forever if they go up.
I didn't say that it was a good a good reason to be concerned. That's like the only thing that comes to mind.
It's not. The birds are a huge issue. Yeah. The birds are a problem. It's the same problem with our Wi-Fi signals. Our Wi-Fi signals are killing millions and millions of birds every fucking year. But nobody's doing anything about it because, oh, they're fucking birds. Who cares? That's how humans are. No, like if the birds stop flying and the seasons stop cycling the way that we, like if birds stop moving seeds through their shit, our natural crop cycles are going to be fucked. And that's how famines happen. Like we can't have birds dying from fucking windmills and Why 5? Because that's how famine happens in like 5 to 7 years. It doesn't happen instantly. It happens over time. And that's why I'm like, no, we need to be worried about that shit. But this is also the short-sightedness of fucking Western views. It's like, oh, we'll take care of that shit later. Like, no, man.
Well, have you
Like-
noticed that the general concern about the bees has gone down?
Because Americans can't do more than one thing at a time. They can't do more than one thing at a time. It's like, no, the bees are still a fucking problem. If anything, the bee problem is worse. Well, it's probably less of a problem because there's less pollution and less human interference. So, like, it's probably gone back up. So that's maybe why. But there's all these things that humans staying home and stopping our, like, consumptive bullshit, like, non-sustainable cycles has, like, allowed the earth to heal. That's why they're not doing stories about it, because it only took a little time for us to, like, not fuck everything up for it to start going back to normal. But that, like, is a horrible news headline. You can't have that headline where it's like, hey, actually humans' behavior is what was fucking, like, we know it was the behavior, but when it has such a stark like and dramatic influence on the ecosystem's capacity to heal, when we stop fucking interfering, that's some shit where, like, yeah, humans are not natural. Like, the cycles we live are 100% not natural, in that the lifestyles that we've been told in the West that are meant to be, like, part of how we maintain modernity are 100% counter in juxtaposition to nature, just period. Everything is unnatural. Everything is fucking unnatural for the sake of trying to appear modern. And it's one of these things where it's like, yeah, that's why this society isn't going to last, because nature is going to fucking kill it. That's just what nature does if you don't go with it. Like, you can't swim against a river and not drown. Or, yeah, and it's like, nature is obviously the river, and there's these humans building their fucking boats like, oh, I'm gonna fucking go up against the or against the flow of the river, and my boat's gonna beat this river. Eventually that engine's gonna fucking give out. You can go against the river for a long time, but eventually the engine's gonna give out because the river is gonna win.
That's assuming people are boats with engines. I think most people are like twigs or leaves getting swept away by the current.
But this country is the boat.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Yeah, and individuals who split off, yeah, of course they're not going to fucking beat the river. Of course they're not. But this boat is sailing against the river as if the boat can beat it because it's got an engine. It's like, well, that engine's going to die going against the river when you could just go the other way and just let the river take you and just, like, use a stick to avoid the bank and getting stuck. Like, and not go over a waterfall. Like, hey, if we about to hit a waterfall, we need to fucking pull over and dock. You know?
Climb the waterfall.
And then
engage waterfall drive.
Take the boat out of that river and find another river. It's pretty simple. Yeah. But people act like, oh, we gotta stay in this same fucking river. We gotta stay in this same like, and I know that's a pretty simple metaphor, but that's what's happening. It's an economic engine for an economic machine. Every country is an economic machine as a unit. That's why we have a GDP to put an abstract representation on the work of a country as a unit, which is fucking dumb, but that's how they measure shit. And then it's like, well, of course this boat is gonna fucking run out of capital at some point because the measurements are like, it's like, why would I measure the wind speed to know how much gas is in my tank? Like, it's like the way people are looking at the algorithm. They don't know which part of the algorithm they need to be looking at. They're just talking about the algorithm in an abstract manner.
But the algorithm is going to steal whatever they're looking for. The algorithm is going to convert that river energy into reverse energy to allow them to scale the waterfall.
Well, and that's the beauty of using that abstract language, because then they're like, oh, the algorithm's doing this and that. And it's like, well, maybe it is. If people don't know what an algorithm is, it's like, well, maybe the algorithm is doing that. I don't know. Maybe it's AI. Maybe it's the Terminator. I don't know. Thank you. And that's, that's sci-fi.
So speaking of AI, I watched quite possibly the worst X-Men cartoon of my life. It's called X-Men Anime. It's on Netflix. And I'm pretty sure that it was AI generated because the characters kind of resembled the X-Men, but they didn't have the behaviors of X-Men that we come to expect from reading comic books. It was like I watched some other anime and they just copy pasted a few elements over the initial animation to make it to turn some guy that kind of had hair that was like Beast. They just made him blue, called him Beast, and gave him long fingernails and teeth. And then the Wolverine character didn't quite look right. Cyclops was the only character that they did right. His bitch ass got fucked up the whole time. But that's not the point. It was the weirdest experience. I felt like I wasn't watching X-Men at all. It was anime where they were cosplaying as X-Men. And then I made the biggest mistake. I watched the companion series, Wolverine. It's like somebody took Spike and gave him claws and made him do some shit to piss off Yakuza. But it wasn't like the Wolverine Silver Samurai story that they could have done because, he's in Japan. They could have done that, but they didn't. And now I've seen two of the worst X-Men animations. I can't stop thinking about it because now, what I said to you the other night was I feel like whoever wrote the X-Men was like they watched the first 3 Fox movies, but they didn't actually pay attention, and that's where they derived pretty much everything about the characters. It was so bad. I'm scolding whoever wrote this, by the way. Like, you did a terrible job, whoever you are. I don't know you. I'm sure that you kissed a bunch of ass to get permission to do that story, but man, we're just getting treated pretty rough at this point, I think, in terms of storytelling. We're getting these regurgitations of stories that they borrow they're not borrowing enough when they try to borrow something, or they just focus on the wrong aspects of the characters. I don't like it. I don't. We've got decades worth of character development here, and these stories are already storyboarded. They don't need to try and reinvent the wheel. They just need to tell us the stories that haven't been told yet. I don't care if we have to reuse Marvel or DC characters. That's part of American mythology at this point, and it's how ethics and morals are taught, and more complex social constructs are explored through their stories. But they don't need to try and create new versions of these stories when they haven't.
I think
they've demonstrated they can't even tell the story.
Here's the thing. I think they do, in that multiverse is like the multiverse perspective is still not well represented in American media, and I think that ends up being a problem when multiverse stories have been prevalent in sci-fi for a long time. So then, like, especially in comic books, like, I think one of the biggest things that DC has ahead of Marvel in general is the multiverse and now the omniverse. And the problem becomes if people perpetually think of the Prime universe as the main because we call it Prime, that gives us an inability to realize that, like, actually all of the universes are equally valid, and the only construction in which the Prime universe is the only valid one is when the Prime universe is the basis for all the rest of them. But that's only one construct in multiverses, where there's now multiverse web stories where there's no prime universe, and the omniverse itself is like the basis for the multiverses. So it's like one of the main stories that's happening in DC right now is like the dark multiverses are the ones that won out, and the multiverses where the heroes win got killed off by the dark multiverses, and that's been going on for like 3 years. So when I'm looking at it, it's like the Kurt Vonnegut approach to living in a censored society, where if you feel as if you're an oppressed person and you're an oppressed citizen that also is facing censorship, you can't have prime universe Superman or prime universe Wonder Woman, prime universe whatever be the story, because that's not what's happening in the real world. And as an artist, as a creative output, it's your job to express what's happening regardless of how you like, not regardless of how you feel about it, but regardless of what those in authority want to be the expression in those images. And this is why you can't have a Boy Scout Superman during a dystopian period in the real world. It's like incongruous. And this is where, like, there are people who will never imagine Superman as being anything but the Christopher Reeve version that they were born into, whereas that period is a completely different period, and that Superman does not actually belong right here. That Superman is incongruous with our time, which is why it feels so odd. Like, if you go back and watch the Christopher Reeve Superman now, that movie feels so detached from the real world. Like, why aren't they addressing, like, misogyny? Why is everybody treating Lois Lane like a piece of meat? Like, she's a journalist. Like, there's all these things about that time period that we address as society now that they weren't ready to address, so they just put it underneath the table. That's why that Superman doesn't belong right now.
The Christopher Reeves Superman Forever crowd definitely does not need to find out what happens when Lois is murdered by the Joker.
We had the Injustice Superman. Like, the Injustice Superman was one of the ones we got. We got multiple Superman, and this is kind of where, again, when you have DC trying to tell a multiverse story that's not super obviously a multiverse story, like on the big screen, a country that is not ready for multiverse stories is not going to receive it well, which is why when it came out, it wasn't well received. But now that the MCU has implemented multiverses, everybody's going back and like that whole Injustice multiverse is getting another shot because people are ready for it. People are literally ready for multiverses now. So something that got released in 2017 is getting fucking re-released. That to me is no better proof that multiverse stories were not. It wasn't that they weren't acceptable. People's minds just weren't able to handle them before 2017, and now we're at a point, because multiverse stories are more mainstream, that it's like, yeah, there's not one Superman, there's not one Wonder Woman, there's not one Wolverine, there's not one Professor X. There's like a multiverse where, yeah, guess what? The Batman Ninja is just as valid as the Bruce Wayne we all grew up with, but it's hard to like come to that perspective when we grew up with Earth Prime being the focus and the like crux of everything.
Yeah, at least Batman Ninja, they seem to write for the characters in a way that made sense.
It didn't. It like that. I didn't feel like that. Like, it felt completely.
It felt like cosplay, but
right. It felt like I didn't feel anything like any of the characters, from Joker to Catwoman to Robin. Like,
no, Gorilla Grodd felt like Gorilla Grodd.
But he's not really a Batman.
No, he's more of a Flash character.
Right, and that's where I'm like, even throwing Gorilla Grodd in there felt like, it felt weird. And that's where I'm like, he's not really a Batman rogue gallery. Like, and that's where I'm like, even that part felt. But that's where I'm like, that still is a valid universe, because then I would like, look at the anime Catwoman and the anime Robin, and they're like super powerful in a different way. Or I guess Nightwing.
That's a good point. Every character in that Batman story had extreme powers that didn't ever exist, really.
It wouldn't work in the canon universe or like the Prime universe. Like those powers just wouldn't. If Catwoman was that powerful in the Prime universe, like nah.
Joker was never that good with mechanical engineering.
No, that too.
Like none of those characters. Gorilla Grodd was the only one who had that kind of skill with mechanical engineering. He doesn't.
In the time travel shit too.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, Batman time travel is just not normal Batman stuff.
Batman time travel only makes sense if Darkseid's involved.
I mean, even then, it's like kind of doesn't, because Darkseid's like Superman's.
I know.
You know what I mean?
He's and really he's more of an interdimensional thing. Time travel doesn't really. Yeah, Batman and time travels, that's kind of complex.
Yeah.
I don't think he would.
Well, but this is where, like, okay, Murder Machine Batman in the Metal universe is like a combination of Batman and Cyborg. So they have all these different variations of, like, every Batman you could think of exists. There's like Bryce Wayne, which is a female version, who's effectively like Batman with Aquaman's powers, but as a woman. Like, there's Baphomet, which is basically Batman, the demon god. There's like but it's also like a version of Cthulhu. I don't know how. Like, I know there's different ways to say that, but whatever. They made a bat version of it, and that's kind of where they abstracted the bat character and trope to be every possible combination of like what a universe could come up with to prove a point, but also I think to just completely destroy this notion that Bruce Wayne is a single thing. Bruce Wayne is a lot of things in a lot of different universes. And then, like, this is kind of where reading that in the comics has given me a lot of different perspective about what a good multiverse story is, and how, you know, the reader or viewer has their perspective of who they want to attach themselves to. But I think it's like actually good to shake that foundation and sometimes kill off the person that the reader is inclined to attach themselves to make them realize, like, hey, that other person is actually important too in this story. Like, just because you identify with this character, that doesn't mean the world revolves around this individual. And it's like really easy to think the world revolves around an individual or person if that individual never gets killed off. And that's where the multiverse angle makes it a lot easier to like kill off Wolverine or kill off Bruce Wayne.
In the Amalgam universe, there is Dark Claw, the Batman Wolverine amalgam.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize Amalgam happened, where it's like, yeah, they're not. DC and Marvel have a friendly rivalry that's not even really a rivalry because they exist in each other's universes. Like, you'll see, I think it was in like the Avenger or Shield TV show. Like, they have Avengers toys, but I think somebody, oh no, it was maybe it was Runaways, but they'll have like DC stuff, like toys in the background, or DC comic books on like a comic book shelf, or like you'll see they'll put this stuff in there and they'll put it in each other's universes, whereas like they both exist in each other's universe as comic books. Like, and that's like canon in not only the TV shows but in the comics as well. So there's all this element of like, yeah, as companies in a capitalist paradigm, technically they're rivals, but they've been cooperating for like decades now. And this is kind of where when people are like, what are you, DC or Marvel? Like, man, that's fucking dumb. That's fucking stupid. It's such a like weird way to approach comic books where I'm like, even DC and Marvel don't approach it like you either have to read DC or Marvel. They're like, read the other one. No, go read go read DC if you're reading a Marvel comic book. We'll actually advertise Batman in here. We'll talk about Batman. We'll talk about Thor in DC Universe. Go read the Avengers. And it's like this whole cross promotion has been going on for so long that the notion of like being either DC or Marvel to me is weird. Like imposing that loyalist cult paradigm on like what you read.
That's like somebody who likes watching. Oh shit! I can't even think of it. Wait, that's a really weird version of sports fanaticism. It's your team. It's a team thing.
Totally.
But these teams only interact for special events, so it's not like they're actually playing the same sport.
But then they'll gloat if a movie comes out and it's not good, and it's like, oh, I'm on the Marvel team. DC just released Wonder Woman 84. People don't like it. Awesome, that's great. I'm gonna go shit on Wonder Woman 84 because it's DC, and it's like that's so weird to me. Because like, okay, I don't know if you guys have seen it. Wonder Woman 84 has some problems. It's not a horrible movie. It has some problems, so it's not a great movie. But it's like the way people are like gloating about even the most slightly negative response if they're like Marvel fans. It's just weird. Like I can appreciate DC films and I can appreciate Marvel films. I can appreciate.
Wait, what's wrong with it?
What's up?
What's wrong with it?
The CGI is really bad. And then some of the writing, it doesn't make sense. The characters some of them are poorly written.
Wait, doesn't make sense because it's a comic book, or doesn't make sense because it's bad writing?
I would say it doesn't make sense because they took the wrong parts of the comic book to implement them.
Okay.
And this is where again, like okay, like the villains are good for like a brief window in the film, and their motivations are just like they're trying to make villains that you can empathize with too much in a way that ends up undermining their villainy. So it becomes this weird, like the best part is the middle and not the climax. And not to say it's not because they don't have explosions and shit. Yeah. But it's because of the poorly constructed character motivations.
So I feel like this is just another example of if they had just gone with what had already been storyboarded out instead of trying to reinvent the wheel along the way and demonstrated that they could actually tell the story properly, then the little embellishments would make more sense and they would be meaningful. And I would actually really enjoy watching, a good Wonder Woman story unfold. But I feel that, whenever I see the runtime for movies, I'm always wondering. I wonder how much they had to chop out of the story to fit into their budget or their time length. Because I know that. I mean, let's just be really honest about it. Infinity War should have taken more movies. There was a lot more going on
that they cut out of the story.
Well, they also cut out, the X-Men.
I mean, but do we really need to see him fawning over Lady Death?
No, we don't. But it would have been nice to see Wolverine whooping some ass too. He did.
I mean, I don't really care. But like, there's stuff where there's elements to stories where I'm like, okay, this is I can see them cutting this out and
they cut out. They could have explored the brief timeline where the Black Panther had the gauntlet.
I mean, but did they really need to? Because this is where again,
they could have.
They could have, but it's like, is it really necessary? I don't really think so. On a big screen, like if it's on a TV show, yeah, but I don't really need that in my films when I think it's pretty agreed upon that television shows are where episodes happen, and film as episode is
it's a waste of the medium.
It is. It's meant to be self-contained, and that's why, like, making episodic films is a weird expectation. And it's like I'm not against episodic films, but this is where, because they were originally meant to be self-contained, then it's like, well, how far do we need a story about every stormtrooper and what they're doing in their life? Well, that's what TV's for. And again, it's like the film is following big narratives and the big plot arcs, and TV is kind of like, yeah, let's go see what this like janitor's life is doing for an episode. This random janitor. And it's fine. And then it's actually an interesting story, but because it's not, unless it's actually visual, like when your screen is taken up by a head, you don't need to see it on a big screen. Think about that. Like, as much as the screen is occupied, whatever percentage is occupied by a head, and when we're having dialogue and the plot is unfolding, most of it's like talking heads, and we're like zoomed in, over the shoulder shot, and sometimes they just switch perspectives to keep it interesting. But like 80% of films, we're just looking at people's heads and maybe their upper torsos, because we don't see their feet, because if we saw their feet, we'd see how short they were. And this is why our perspectives on these people are limited, so we don't see, like, half these motherfuckers are like 4'5", like, and they're meant to be like, oh, bigger than life, because that's the trick that the big screen plays when these people's talking heads are given more influence than they actually would have if we realize, like, oh, this person's like 4'5". It's not that 4'5" people shouldn't have important opinions, but we're like naturally predisposed to take people more seriously if they're bigger and more imposing, which is why we get these like 40-foot talking head like dialogues to be like, oh, that movie was really powerful. Like, Kevin Smith movies are like 97% talking head, if not 99%. And then you're like, oh, that was really a really great film. But it's the trick of the media making you feel like that shit is more actually important than it is.
So Ridley Scott is like, I feel like he's like a master of the big screen, because a lot of his movies, his stories, if you're not watching it on a big screen, you end up looking at these characters that are maybe, the size of your thumb, maybe the length of your hand from palm to the tip of your finger, maybe on a big TV. But if you're not watching it on a really large screen, it's hard to even tell what's going on sometimes, because he makes such gigantic movies. And so watching, like, he made a what was it? Crusades. That's it. He made a Crusades movie called Kingdom of Heaven, with the guy that played Legolas, Orlando Bloom, I think. Yeah, and that movie, everyone's tiny in it until you're right upon them. Then they do the whole, like, upper torso headshot that takes up the entire screen. But a significant portion of that film is people riding on horses off in the distance, or two guys having a sword fight in the lower third of the screen, and then the rest of it is this big scenic vista. And then now we have his Raised by Wolves, where there's a significant portion of that story where everyone's just tiny little stick figures walking around.
But that's also when they have like the scene where everybody's eating and then it zooms in, it becomes talking heads.
Yeah.
It's hard not to fall asleep. Like, because of the pacing of those films being so dynamic, and it like, because of, again, that talking head moment, it's like super hard not to fall asleep in the middle of Alien when they're like sitting around eating.
Well, Alien's
like,
weird because it's like silent other than the dialogue.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like, because of even then, it's like the silence isn't even what does it. It's like the pacing, and then when you get into those lulls and like nothing is actually happening, and the like dramatic effect is like the size of the people relative to the screen, then it's hard not to fall asleep. And that's where I'm like, when you get desensitized to talking heads, that's when you start to see like, oh, these big talking heads in movies are really just using like a stimulus trick to make the dialogue seem more important and more actually moving or more emotionally important than it actually is.
Their head is bigger. This must be an intimate dialogue.
Right. Or like, oh, that person, you can see them taking that deep breath, and the audio makes that deep breath like really, really audible. And these elements of like overacting through size and loudness are like, oh my God, I am so tired of deep breathing as like being a way to express emotion and acting. It's just like, it's so overused. Yeah, dude. Like it's like
They do that a lot in Lucifer.
they do it a lot in everything. It's everywhere. And this is kind of where film has started to drift into theater, whereas theater is meant to overact and be overdressed and over makeup so the people in the last row can see it. That's why theater is so over dramatic, whereas the whole reason film and television is meant to be understated is because you can get the close-ups on the face and you can get the close-up to see when somebody's taking a deep breath, so you don't have to like blow out the sound to have them hear them breathing and shit. So there's this element of using overstimulating to trick people into thinking stuff is actually happening, which is where I'm like, we're past that point of it working on people, so the story has to actually be there. And there's a lot of shit that doesn't have the story there, and it's just all like sound and light flashing and CGI. And that's kind of where like 40% of Wonder Woman was the light and flashing and the sound to compensate for the poor writing, which is also why it's like, I'm not trying to beat up on the film, but it's mainly because I think, what's his name? Joss Whedon had originally crafted the film, and then Patty Jenkins was tasked with like coming in and fixing his patriarchal fuckery. Because that's where like Joss Whedon is just a horrible fucking director that got recognition by doing the like candy pop interpretation of MCU that was like really, really hot when Obama was president and everybody was high off of hope. And then once like we got the orange clown and people were like, oh, this Joss Whedon shit is ridiculous. Like Joss Whedon comic book films instantly became like so ridiculously stupid that anything that he was touching was like garbage from that point on. And it's not because anything about his style changed, it's because people stopped living in a fucking fantasy world. Like something happened between 2016 and 2017, not just Obama going out of office and whatever, but people stopped like being high on lies. Like I think it was really difficult to maintain the facade of like,
Hope wasn't
yeah,
giving them their fix.
right, yeah. And again, it's like even people on the left who had been complicit in the caste system started to even like drop out of it and wake up, and it's like,
Holy crap, he wrote Alien Resurrection.
who?
Joss Whedon. It's on his IMDb as one of the writers of Alien Resurrection.
Yep, makes sense.
God.
So that was trash.
You know what? In 1989 through 1990, he wrote 4 episodes of Roseanne. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Toy Story also.
Joss Whedon is trash. That whole man is trash.
He gave
That
us
whole
Buffy,
man is
the Vampire Slayer, and Firefly, and Angel, And
Throw Josh Whedon out with all his movies, all that trash. He was like, he actively cut out multiple people of color. Ryan Choi, cut out of Justice League. We were supposed to have a fucking Asian Adam. Joss Whedon, cut the fuck out. We were supposed to have a black Iris West, well, like the one they have on the show. Joss Whedon, cut the fuck out. We ain't gonna have no negress in here tempting all our little white children. How dare you include a Negro seductress in this plot? That's what Joss Whedon sounds like.
Sounds like a plantation owner.
yeah, man, that was really good. I mean, that was like that hit all the notes.
Oh my god, yeah. Joss Whedon definitely calls black women negresses. I can
You could
see that. I can see that in my mind's eye. Yeah, because again, that's where, Ray Fisher coming out accusing him and Jeff Johns of basically, he was almost really polite about it in the sense of he called it racial discrimination, but he didn't. I think he obviously had NDAs that he couldn't break, but the way he was talking about it, it was like actually very polite. And that's where I'm like,
dude, you actually just did one of the best Cornelius Hawthorne, the late father of Pierce Hawthorne of Community. You did one of the best imitations of Cornelius Hawthorne. I was trying to think of the name. I had to look it up. That your hateful old man with racist and elitist tendency voice. Like you even got the sound of the ivory toupee that he wears. I mean, like, I can't give you a more of a I guess I could give you the applause button thing, but that was really impressive.
Oh man.
Like you just sold like 50 stainless banner flags. I'm really sorry, but
oh man, yeah. No, it's like they're really easy to mimic and mock because they're so basic.
yeah.
Like it'd be more difficult if I had a more complex subject to mimic, but they're all pretty stereotypically basic. Well, and it's like you can guarantee it's like they have these like go-to slurs. Oh, the Chinaman is like Joss Whedon definitely says Chinaman at least once a year. At least once a year. Oh my god. Because then they use that as like a plural slur. Like whenever they say the Chinaman, they're never talking about an individual Chinese person. It's always like that's how they like they're thinking they're not being racist, and it's like, oh, there's so many layers of how racist people operate and how they act, where they like try to hide their racism. They like look around like pretend, or it's like they actually pretend they care to see if anybody's around, if they're ready to say the N-word.
The one that I find most amusing is when someone says Oriental around me, and then someone will correct them and say he's not a rug.
Oh man, well it's like I know I went to the butcher's block last week and they were closed because they closed early, and somebody was in there, like the door was locked, and he had just rap music on, just blasting it. He was rapping along, just dropping N-bombs, and I'm like, man, this is what they do when they like fucking lock the doors and like they think nobody's watching, and that's where again it's like every time a black, like, he had the white man's nightmare play out where he's like, I'm gonna lock the doors, look around, I'm gonna say nigga all I want, I'm gonna say it every time in this song. If they say it in songs, why can't I say it? And he was like sitting there, nigga, nigga, nigga. And it's, I mean, it wasn't, that's not, no rap song is nigga, nigga. There's no
with
song
a big ass
like
knife in his hand.
right. Walking around, and that's where I'm like, man, if he only knew that there was like a black dude watching him through the glass window right now, like his heart would just fucking jump out his chest. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh my God, I didn't mean this. I didn't mean to. I was just rapping, and it would be like this thing
I
where
was just
like,
rapping.
I don't really hate black people. I don't really hate black people. And it's like, if he only knew, that's exactly how that shit would have gone down. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. He'd have been crying and shit. Please don't hit me. Please don't hit me.
I was just rapping.
Oh my God. But that's where, again, it's like, as a black person, you end up stumbling into situations like that where you're like, okay, this is what it's like. Yeah. People lock their doors so they can rap along, and then will like not do that shit in public because they know it would be fucking like, do that shit around some black people and see what happens. Again, it's like, yeah, you got freedom of speech, but it's everybody wants to like be a nigga, but nobody wants to be a nigga. Like, and that's where, again, it's like, yeah, I've been watching Boondocks, man, and it's real funny how like,
Boondocks is great.
oh yeah, but one of the
so good.
I think one of the best things they got is this whole nigga moment notion, where it's like white people have this notion of how black people are, and then they have like an idea of what they think like niggas are, and like it's okay to sort of like have this hierarchy because black people do it. It's like, nah, that's not what we do. But the nigga moment in Boondocks is like a great way to illuminate it, in that like white people want a nigga moment safari where they see it from a distance, but it doesn't involve them. And that's kind of where it's like, oh shit. Like once you see how like,
God, you don't. Nobody really wants that. I don't.
Right.
I mean, they do. They think they do, but I don't think anybody actually really wants that.
no, but capitalism lets you buy pieces of it and like compartmentalize what you access of that nigga moment in a way where you're like, oh, I can get the grill. I can rap over. I can buy a beat. I can buy a rap. I can buy an image. I can become Lil Pump. I can become whatever. I can become Lil Next Thing and just be like, oh yeah, guess what? I'm a constructed image, MAGA. Make a song called MAGA Steppin', because that's how capitalism has taken the pieces of a nigga moment and allowed this little dude to become Lil Pump. Lil Pump is a whole bought, constructed ass image. He probably hasn't written a fucking rhyme. He probably has never ever actually learned like how to write a rhyme, and somebody's just been buying that shit the whole time. And this is how capitalism will deconstruct a culture, so then it becomes a costume that you can just buy piecemeal, and then have Lil Pump be like, oh, I got more hip hop credibility than Chris Bates over here because I rap. I got a fucking platinum album. Man, if he bring that, like, it's so funny. Like, Lil Pump has to stay his ass in the fucking white suburbs, because if he brought that shit anywhere around a black person, I am the most nerdy ass black person that is not gangster, not ghetto, the farthest you will get. But you try to bring that nigga moment around me, Lil Pump, he knows he will get the shit smacked out of his fucking face. Ain't nobody like, he ain't coming around no actual black people doing that shit. And that's where, again, it's like all his security guards, they're getting paid. None of them fucking black people like that dude. No black people around Lil Pump like that dude. Every black person in his circle is getting paid to be there. And that's where, again, it's like black culture has been commodified in a way that then people see these Lil Pumps and it's like, oh, what do you mean he grew up? No, fuck, he didn't grow up that way. Fuck out of here, man.
So apparently there's a Tekashi documentary on Hulu, and what I understand is that it actually has really high viewing statistics, but I can't find a review where anyone's actually admitted that they've watched it.
Like the Kardashians.
Yeah.
Right? They're still on the air, but nobody's watching them. Cause it's a fucking plant, man. Ain't nobody watching that shit. Nobody watching no bullshit. They paid for the views just like they paid for his album streams. Nobody listening to no fucking Tekashi.
Man, I could totally get a hold of my buddy in India and be like, "Yo, Samir, I need you to get me in touch with one of those computer farms where I can get like 10,000 views in an hour." You know, one of those deals.
Yeah, man. People have no idea how easy it was to trick the YouTube algorithms.
Man,
algorithms. It's all back to the algorithms.
Yeah.
Algorithms are smarter now, but it was real easy to trick the algorithms.
They would just set up a room full of like cell phones and then point them all to the same YouTube link, and lo and behold, there's 500 views instantly, all from like a subnet.
And then motherfuckers was becoming popular overnight. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, 10 million streams. Like, motherfucker, you are so dumb. Those aren't real. Those aren't real. Because then you realize, like, how many streams. There was, like, some of the releases would have more streams than there was actually time possible to have that number of streams happen.
Yeah.
Where you're like, based on the number of unique listeners their service had. Because it was something like Tidal, where they were like, oh, we've had so many streams. It's like, well, you only got 1 million users, so that means everybody have to listen to that shit like 8 times in a row on repeat. Y'all lying.
One of them got a little bit of fire recently because it turns out that they were waiting their, I think it's like Beatport or one of those where you buy music sites, and there was some concern because when somebody buys it, that's worth like 100 streams or something, or 1,000 streams if you buy it. So it throws off the algorithm, which is also kind of one of those like, okay, what does that actually mean? Somebody bought it. That means they're not going to be streaming it from the site, so they're just padding the numbers because they expect that person to have listened to it 100 more times.
Yeah,
that can't be right.
It's a really arbitrary metric that's like obviously not accurate. Like 100 times is a lot. That's a lot of times. I mean,
if I'm trying to learn a song, like really learn it inside and out, I might listen to it 100 times, but not like back to back to back to back. Fuck.
How long? 100 times is a lot of fucking times.
Yeah.
Bro. That's a lot of times. I don't even think it takes that many to learn a song. Like a person might learn it after like 20. Like 20 is a lot of time. I mean, think about listening. Okay, if a song's 4 minutes and you listen to that song for 80 minutes.
I'm just trying to think in terms of like what kind of music would actually require listening to, like some classical music if you didn't have the score, maybe, and it's like an orchestration. But even then, at that point, conductors, they don't need to listen to it. They can just look at the score.
Well, but in your music players, you can probably go in and see how many times you played your songs. You know, I know we keep track of that shit, and it's like, you know, the most, like whatever song you've listened to the most, like, you know.
So my play counts, I reset my play counts fairly regularly, actually, Nate. So my most played track on my drum and bass playlist is 11.
So they're overestimating by like 10. In that you don't you have a library to go through. So coming back to the same song for 100 streams or 100 plays is like, ignoring the infinite number of songs that exist. There's an infinite number of songs. And you're going to go back to the same one 100 times? That's fucking weird. That's some like OC, like, yeah, I guess somebody who's obsessive compulsive may do that. But like the average person, when new shit is coming out constantly, there's new music coming out fucking constantly. Every minute of every day, there is new music being released in every fucking genre. I'm going to go back to the same song 100 times?
I don't know. I've got a few albums that I've probably listened to not 100 times.
That's what I'm saying, bro. A whole album 100 times.
I mean, there's some albums that I've got on like long-term repeat that I've been listening to every so often for the past like 20 years, but I'm not like...
Is there a Michael Jackson song do you think you've heard 100 times? I don't think I've heard any Michael Jackson song a fucking 100 times. Not one. Maybe 50. Maybe.
Ooh, those Now That's What I Call Music commercials. I think I may have heard like a portion of a verse like 100 times, but not the entire song.
That's what I'm saying. Listening to the whole song is different than hearing part of it.
Yeah.
Like sitting and listening to the whole song is like, I wouldn't count. Oh, gets mixed in halfway. No, that's not the whole song. You didn't sit through the whole song.
I've watched Ghost in the Shell, the original Ghost in the Shell, maybe 20 times.
Yeah.
What about radio station programming for commercial radio, where they have songs that they play repeatedly?
Oh,
I
like
remember
Clear
hearing
Channel?
the same song.
The same shit
over and over again for like a month, or for months or throughout the year, and you just keep hearing the same song like every half hour or every hour or something like that.
But do you stay on the station if you don't like the song? Who does that? Who stays on? Like, if I don't like a song, that's like actual torture to stay on a station that I don't like the song playing. Like, who does that to themselves that many times? 100 times? That's fucking insane.
But is it unreasonable to assume then that there is nobody who would do something like that?
So
I think it's pretty unreasonable in that you can just turn it off, like, or change the channel. Like, that's when people channel surf. Like, if something comes on you don't like, that's when people start channel surfing to find something that they actually like. It's like, why would you channel surf if you're listening to something you like? You know what I mean?
Falling plays at the beginning of the show, and I don't think I've actually listened to that entire song, sat down and listened to it in over a year.
Which song?
Falling, the one that plays the intro to the show.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I've actually sat down and listened to it. I use that 5-minute period to get everything set up. And use the final countdown.
Yeah, and that's where, again, I'm a fucking musician. Of all people, of anybody who should have listened to a song like 100 times, that's where I'm like, man, whenever I would practice music, I would stop practicing because I would get sick of a song. You know what I mean? You get sick of shit really easy when it's repetitive. Like, when you keep hearing the same, like, that's how the mind works. It's not just me, it's not just you. If people get repeated shit, we get desensitized to it, and then it gets annoying, and once it goes past annoying, that's when it actually starts to become torturous.
I remember going to a party up in like South Bend one time, and they had like a house room and a drum and bass room, and in the house and techno, but in the house room I think I heard Stardust, maybe, or The Music Sounds Better With You by Stardust. I think I may have heard that like 3 or 4 times that night.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't even like different remixes. They had the same press.
I'm about to say a song that I know you've heard a lot, but you're going to have to ask yourself if you heard it 100 times. Drowning.
No, I haven't heard that 100 times, but I've heard that maybe 60 times.
Exactly. Maybe 60. 60's a lot. 60's a lot.
I think I may have listened to The Nine by Bad Company maybe 70 times.
The Drowning by Cleveland Lounge is one of the most played songs at raves.
Yeah.
Like, period.
Yeah,
just period.
Classic at this point.
Yeah, it's 100% a classic. Or Ready or Not.
Man,
like
1200 really brought the goods, man.
Yeah. But 100 times, Ready or Not 100 times, that shit would be torturous.
Yeah.
Like, at about 60, you're like, okay, I've heard this enough. I think I've heard like because I can play "Drowning in My Head"
Yeah, I haven't even listened to that song in like.
song. I can play it in my head because I've heard it so many times. Like from the intro to the remix, the Raga MC.
No,
I,
like the last time I listened to that song, I had just purchased an Akai Timberwolf synthesizer. It's a 4 oscillator synthesizer, and I was playing with it one day, and I pressed one of the keys, and it reminded me of that song. So I pulled it up and listened to it, and dialed it in on the synthesizer, and then learned how to play the bass line, which repeats extensively, and it's not a complex song at all. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. 4 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. I'm gonna say 4 years ago was the last time I listened to Drowning. I haven't even thought about it till now.
because it's after once you get to that 60, it's like, I think I need this maybe once every 4 years.
Fuck, it might even be only 50 times. It might only be 40 times. I stopped counting because I stopped. It's like a nursery rhyme at this point. It's not a. It's not to me. It's not the sound of drum and bass anymore. It's not the sound of. It's old classic drum and bass.
All that said, this is why streaming counting a purchase as 100 streams is a fucking lie.
Yeah.
The algorithm is lying.
Yeah.
The algorithm has been programmed to lie.
So wait, does that mean if they don't vote, they're actually going to get 100 votes?
Right? Oh man, it's so crazy to see so many people detach from reality in a way where I'm like, those people are actively trying to disenfranchise effectively black people and minorities, but then they're trying to act like they're preserving the government and the Constitution, and it's like, how do we let this double speak go on? Like they still now they're calling the Nashville bombing suspect a lone wolf, as everybody anticipated, and we're gonna learn about his mental issues, and we're gonna learn about how society had treated him wrong. But we'll never ever hear the Nashville guy called a terrorist. We will never ever hear that.
Well, that's because he didn't make any political demands.
Oh, is that why?
Yeah, you gotta have political demands to be a terrorist.
Is that the caveat?
I'm pretty sure the not DOJ released its domestic terrorism guidelines recently, like updated versions for the bar bus driving experience, and there's a pretty specific section that's like, there's got to be some kind of political interest involved. It can't just be a person who does shit to scare people, even though that's terrorism in a nutshell.
Yeah, that one's it's too predictable. These media cycles are too predictable. Like I think all the people watching the media scramble to like use every word but terrorism none of us are surprised that the lone wolf narrative has emerged now.
Well, you'd think that there'd be more focus on the extensive number of outages, like service outages and call stability problems that have been reported. And then if you look at the heat map, the like carrier strength heat maps, there are weird like Swiss cheese pockets where there must have been something more important in that cluster they're building, like some kind of like really advanced server cluster, or something that does more like a higher level of management, because like I was just reading about how service is down immediately in like Nashville, and they're experiencing all sorts of weird problems, and local businesses are having to figure out like should have come up with a communications failure contingency types of situations. Nobody was prepared for a major hub of information to go down. And so this is Fuck, this is like cybersecurity 101. You've got to have like fail safes. How can one installation bring the whole thing down? It's not supposed to happen. There's supposed to be redundancies.
I mean, in a good system, there's supposed to be redundancies.
Well, I'm making assumptions, obviously.
Yeah, I think when you assume the best, like
I've been watching too much Star Trek. I have. I've just been watching too much Star Trek because, you know, that's a story universe where people figured it out. That's like, I think that's unattainable hope at this point. Right now, maybe not in like a couple of months or a couple of years or decades. I still have hope that humanity will figure out a way to you know quit fighting over water.
yeah, Nestle, man. Nestle and their bullshit. It's crazy, yeah. I- I'm like still weirded out that as an adult, other like governments have not stopped investing in ways to like murder people. Like that's insane. That's just fucking insane to me that like there's not been some sort of moratorium on like putting money towards murder. And that's where I'm like, I guess like there's been zero movement towards less money towards murder. And that's where I'm just like, I have no qualms not connecting with humans in this time period. Like this, I don't, it's obviously still Roman. Like this is kind of where I don't really see this as disconnected from Roman, at least in the West. Like it's not really modern. Like Bruno Latour wrote an article called "We've Never Been Modern," and it really breaks down why society is actually like not modern at all. We just have these like fancy toys and technology that give us the feeling of being modern, but we're still not cave people. But as I'm not trying to denigrate cave people because some ways they're actually more advanced, but in living in a completely non-natural disconnected bubble, our notion of what makes something modern is based on material objects rather than a perspective, in that the perspective hasn't really evolved in like at least 2,000 years. Like ethics are a modern invention, which are it's crazy to think of how recent ethics are.
The last 1% of humanity's existence.
Right. Yeah. Barely. The fuck.
No, that's a good point. I remember hearing, I can't remember where I read it or saw it, or maybe somebody said it to me, that essentially nothing has really changed since Rome, since classic Rome. That we still have roads, we've got markets, we've got a military, we've got laws, there are attorneys, and there are craftsmen, and the real big advancement has come in the form of we don't have horses pulling our chariots or carts anymore, and they go really fast. And we have computers, but we really aren't using them to do anything. Well, most people aren't using computers to do anything that they couldn't have done before with a pad, with a like a pad of paper and a pencil, and you know basic math skills. But really, it's it's small. It's very tiny incremental improvements, and only small portions of the population are doing those things. The vast majority of people aren't involved in particle physics. They're not scanning the cosmos for different wavelengths of radiation to figure out if there's any interest in exploring certain portions of the sky. We Most people probably couldn't explain how LIGO works, and so that's one of the most advanced sensors that humanity's ever created. But only a few people even get to use it. So we haven't really changed much. We've improved a few things, like it's not dirty, it doesn't stink. People bathe. Um, I can only imagine how horrible, Rome circa, 12 BC or 100 BC would have smelled like, or whatever, whenever Roman society emerges and matures before they just begin the fall.
You ever been to Paris?
No, I've not.
People still shit on the streets in Paris.
Oh, well, then we haven't really come that far.
Like it's still like the whole high heel.
Oh wait, recently this year, the New York I think it was New York Transit. They declared that it was now illegal to shit or piss in the subway. So we're not really even that far either.
Oh fuck no! America has some. I mean, you been to San Francisco?
Yeah,
bro. There's whole parts of that city that smell like piss.
Yeah,
like just straight up. You go outside, it smells like piss.
Oh, so there's some heavy cynicism on the internet with the possibility of a $600 stimulus that it looks like is going to be, that's just more.
I forgot about that shit.
That's like a spite promise. They say we'll do it just to spite people, and then they don't actually do it to spite the other people. But apparently $600 is like the number in San Francisco to get a hotel room, get a nice meal, and
for one day,
and enough drugs to overdose.
That makes sense.
That's some hardcore internet cynicism, but it's also
pretty accurate.
That's if the numbers work out, man. So apparently there have been a lot of suicides in the last year, and like way more than normal. And in some places, the suicide death toll is probably running. It's probably attributed to COVID in some places, but it's bad.
I mean, yeah, it's the government's fault, really.
Yeah.
If anybody's.
And talk about a complex empathy test of our government. That really isn't all that complex. Save the people. Save the people at any cost.
That loss of life isn't reported broadly across many commercial media sources either.
Yeah. Well, imagine for a second the long-term impact of COVID when, like, the principal breadwinner of a family is taken, or the long-term impact when the matriarch of the family passes away from COVID, and then the family just disintegrates because they can't function without her, or there's any number of scenarios where someone dies, and it's not just them dying. There are untold impact, things that people can't account for. Someone's going to have to go through therapy because their mom or their dad or their grandparent or someone close to them is dead, their sibling. And these are things that we can't quantify right now. But our government has pretty much made sure that they didn't care. They didn't care about kids in cages either, so it's not that big of a stretch to me. Oh, got no tone.
These same people who don't care about American poverty are trying to, like, preserve the freedom of some girl who went to the Cayman Islands and broke quarantine, and now she got arrested. And it's like those people only want to preserve white supremacist elitism, and that involves making sure that Americans don't actually get any help, and the only help they get is enough to get them an overdose.
Yeah. Fancy hotel, a meal, and enough smack to knock you into the oblivion.
I don't know about that fancy hotel part. Like, there's no.
Yeah, I think if $600 is enough to check out with, any hotel's fancy at that point.
I mean, dog, San Francisco cheap hotel is like $200.
Yeah,
that's where I'm
true.
like, a fancy hotel, that's like more than that. Like, I've done Airbnb in San Francisco, and like, for a nice place, it was like $400, $500 for a night. Where that I did that because the hotels are too expensive. Where you're like getting bullshit for like $500-$600, and that's where I'm like, I stayed in like a nice hotel before, but because of where they're located, like you go outside and it's like, it smells like shit and piss because all these areas are like overrun with homeless people. So it's like, there's this whole facade of like, oh yeah, you're in a nice hotel, but it's in a poor neighborhood because of gentrification. And that's where, again, it's like, I get what the cynical people are saying in that, but even then, I'm like, I'm even more cynical than them. Like, they ain't gonna be able to afford no fucking hotel with $600. Not in San Francisco.
They'll get like a portion of a room at a hostel.
What I mean, bro, the hostels are occupied by like wealthy Europeans.
Yeah.
In San Francisco, that's who occupies the hostel. The poor people ain't going to no fucking, like, they can't afford that hostel even with the $600. That's where I'm like, hostels in San Francisco aren't cheap because they're catering to wealthy Europeans and like
cheap? Well,
no, nothing in San Francisco is cheap. But that's where I'm like, they have hostels there, but they're not even cheap.
I'm not gonna like go stay at a hostel in San Francisco. But.
No. Well, because the hostels are like near the hotels, so then they like, you're paying for slightly less, but because of where they are, where they're put them, like, oh, you still got a hostel in a nice area. It's like, yeah, it'd be great if they were like
$135.
not $20. Hostels are supposed to be like $20.
92.
Yep.
75.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right.
899.
That's a regular hotel, probably. Or is that a hostel?
297. 225.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
It's ridiculous, man. And then for $225, you're probably getting like a fucking 3-star. Like, straight up, that's probably a 3-star in San Francisco. That shit would be
2.5.
5. What is it?
2.5.
2.5?
2.5.
Yep, I knew it. I fucking knew it, man. I fucking knew it. That you're getting 2.5 stars in San Francisco for $225. That's why I don't fuck with that shit, man. People chase wealth and chase status in a place where all the numbers are fucked. So when you actually go see what the numbers are, you're like, wait, what?
Oh, you can stay in a closet for $60.
Yeah. No, man. And that's where you go to Indianapolis, that same $225 will get you embassy suites. Like, straight up. But, and then people don't realize, like, yeah, if you're going to a hotel, you're sleeping in fucking any, like, you're either not in your hotel or you're in your hotel constantly. So it's like, it's either you don't spend a shitload on the hotel or you spend a shitload on a hotel and just stay in the hotel.
$125, $130 gets you the nice suite at the, no, that gets you to the downtown embassy suite. And, let's see, where's the most expensive room?
People just don't know, like, where, they don't know when to flex. It's like you go flex in downtown Indianapolis. That shit goes way farther than trying. You can't even like. There's shit that you can't even do. Like I went to a club in Boston, and they had a bottle of champagne for like a $5,000. I'm like, you guys are fucking stupid. $5,000 on a bottle of champagne that you can go down to the fucking corner store and get for like 50 is fucking stupid. But that's what these people go do. And then they're like, oh, I want to like be like these people who go spend money to have like a girl in a bikini bring out champagne with the fucking like $2 sparklers.
Yeah, so that comes at a premium. You have to pay for the right to have a $5,000 bottle brought out to you in a special area.
That shit was so dumb, man.
There's a lot of that going around. I don't know about now, but that subculture certainly exists in these parts.
Yeah, MIT paid for a bunch of people to go there, and that's what I like went and saw, and I'm like, this is stupid. This is dumb. This whole party culture of like, this bottle of champagne is $5,000. I'm like, man, you people are so dumb and think because they have $5,000 to throw away on a bottle of champagne, they're successful. Like, you guys are fucking Sodom and Gomorrah right there. Those people. But that's where, again, it's like real easy to get wrapped up in this bullshit material culture because they do such a good job of glorifying it through the media. And that's where it's like, Daniel knows exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. Those dumbass clubs, because they don't have there's no club in Indianapolis that would ever charge $5,000 for a bottle of champagne.
And materialism runs rife around here, man. I mean, trying to get an apartment for a studio apartment for anything less than $1,600 a month and is almost impossible.
My God. Oh my. And that's
a one bedroom, the average, because they can get so expensive, an average one bedroom is around like $2,000 a month. It's not like $2,200.
Oh my God.
Bedroom is like, $3,200.
I've got a 15-year mortgage, and my monthly mortgage payments were just under $6,000.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree.
And
here's the thing, though, the balance with mortgages is fucked because that system ends up like putting people in a position where they can have like 6 or 7 mortgages where they're paying like $500, and then the person renting from them is paying like $1,000 on some shit that the person who owns it pays like half the price. So like I pay $800 for a 2-bedroom apartment, which is not bad, but when you realize, yeah, exactly. When you realize like the scale of like what people who get mortgages can get, then you're like, oh, they fuck black people over, so then we have to rent. Like, black people will not get a mortgage in a nice place. Like, they just actively won't do it. For anybody who doesn't know about this shit, it's called redlining. This is a whole practice that goes back hundreds of years. Like, if I want to get a mortgage, they're going to put it in a poor-ass neighborhood, so then that's the only property I'll be able to get. It don't matter how much money I make. It literally does not matter how much money I make. The bankers will get to decide which mortgages I get and which ones I don't. So therefore, the only way I can get a house that's in a nice neighborhood is by dealing directly with the homeowner. And that's like what a lot of people don't realize, which is then where a lot of black people end up renting because we don't really have an actual choice. Like, I don't want to fucking, like, in Indiana, I could get so much more for $800, but because I don't want to deal. But also the flip side of that is homeowners around here are fucking shady, because then they'll sell you a fucking bullshit ass house where the foundation's broken, there's black mold, and you don't realize you're buying a house that is basically like condemned. And it's like they can get just enough polish on these homes to make it not appear condemned, so then you end up getting a mortgage on a fucking place that's like gonna fall apart on your watch, and you're gonna have to put in 100 grand, 200 grand to then have a home that you thought you were getting a deal on. So that's also where I'm like, I'm not even worried about fucking around in this area, because it's a whole lot of shady shit in the housing market where, again, it's like, it's not equal. The housing market is racist. The housing market is imbalanced, and it's also meant to put people in a position where they're vulnerable, which is also why I'm laughing at all these fuckers that got all the mortgages on these Airbnb spots trying to drive up prices. Fuck all those people.
Well, those houses are going to be on the market eventually.
Oh yeah.
So, because the whole
I'm not buying those bitches either. I'm not buying them bitches either.
I feel like the great Airbnb scandal it won't, but it could result in a true housing for the homeless program. Internet, you guys can take this and will it happen? It could happen, but it won't.
They could have done that shit in the 80s. Yeah, it could have done that shit in the 90s. It could have done that shit in the early 2000s.
They could have done it this year. Amazon alone made enough money to pay for it.
Yep. But then they wouldn't have anybody to work for them to make them feel rich. That's the only thing poverty actually does. Poverty doesn't serve any purpose except to make rich people feel rich. There's no purpose for it. In a society where we know we're not living in a closed system, we know there's enough resources, we know enough food for 10 billion people every year gets made, and the food for 3 billion people gets thrown away because of capitalism. We know that now. We can scientifically track it all. So the only reason poverty exists is to make rich people feel rich in 2020. That's the only reason. And we can say that now, which is also why all millionaires and all billionaires can burn in hell. All of them. All of them can burn in hell.
God, imagine if people were just happy with enough.
Right. Bro, if people realize that, like, all you need is, like, enough, and then you have time left for yourself, you don't need more than enough. Once you have enough, that's literally all you need. Any more than enough is the definition of gluttony.
Yeah.
That is the literal definition of gluttony. Nobody needs more than enough. Why? I could have another room to put more stuff in, I guess.
Well, your walls aren't covered in shelves yet, and your walls aren't full of your stuff yet. So do you even need one yet?
I mean, if I don't want it to be like cluttered necessarily, like, and I can do it with order, but right now there's enough space in here where I can move around. I can like do martial arts in my living room if I wanted to. If I start putting up shelves, I don't know if I could do that, and then I would need another room. I would need an empty room to do martial arts in when I can't go outside. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like this escalating, oh shit, I put too much stuff in this room, now I need another empty room. Yeah. Fuck. That's cycle, man.
That's the nature of it all.
Yeah.
That's actually, it's funny. The only times I consider building an external building to facilitate a studio for the show or for music or for any reason, it's always because it's like, well, I need more space to do this thing, but I also want to do it in this environment. If I'm going to build a building to do it, I might as well build it sufficiently large enough that I can handle like future expansion. So that's one of those things I've been researching is what's the actual threshold where I will actually need to expand. Like it's a need-based requirement. It's not a I want to do this. I'm going to build something just because. I don't really see a point in doing that.
Well, and it's also an attempt at permanence. Like, you don't really need it. You have the capacity to put all that stuff up impermanently, but this is the attempt at permanence in an impermanent world. Like, nothing in this universe, in this entire fucking universe, is permanent. But yet we have these notions of like, oh, I'm going to make this a permanent room, a permanent fixture, because that's what this paradigm makes us believe we can buy into to avoid death, ultimately. Like, as long as we can buy something, we can avoid death. Is what it comes, like, that's the lie. That's the trick. You can buy something and it'll help you not die. It'll help you like avoid non-existence and being forgotten to history. That's all this shit is like meant to try to keep us buying. And that's the craziest part to me is like you can't even buy your way into immortality, like concerning making an impact. But that's also why it tries to convince people to buy into it. Because like if you realize like you don't need money to make an impact on people's lives, like you can go fucking change somebody's life today. Just go out and change people's lives. You don't need any money.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.